In 1992, Pepsi was trying to crack the health-conscious market with something revolutionary, a cola that looked pure. Clear meant clean, clear meant healthy, clear meant the future. On paper, it actually worked. It did not. Crystal Pepsi was not built to last. The problem was not execution. The problem was identity. It looked like water, but it was Pepsi, and those two do not coexist. And for a moment, it worked. Not because it was good, but because it was new. This is not a story about bad ideas. It is a story about cognitive sabotage. Once you see it, you will start noticing it everywhere. The early 1990s were not just about grunge music and flannel shirts. They marked the dawn of mainstream health consciousness in America. Suddenly, everything artificial became suspect. Consumers wanted purity, and marketers quickly realized that seeing is believing. The solution was simple: make everything transparent. This transparency trend swept across consumer products with remarkable speed. Ivory introduced clear soap bars, Crystal deodorant promised chemical-free protection with its translucent stick, and even Scope launched a clear mouthwash. The psychological connection was powerful and unmistakable. If you could see through it, it must be pure. If it is pure, it must be healthy. The executives at PepsiCo watched this cultural shift with intense interest. In their boardrooms, the discussion was not about whether to capitalize on this trend, but how quickly they could do it. For decades, Pepsi had been fighting an uphill battle against Coca-Cola, forever cast as the silver medalist in the cola wars. They needed something revolutionary, a paradigm shift that would redefine what soda could be. The challenge was clear, literally. Brown carbonated beverages were increasingly viewed with suspicion by health-conscious consumers. The very color that defined cola had become its liability in this new era of transparency. Caramel coloring, once an innocent ingredient, was now perceived as an artificial additive, a relic of the chemically enhanced past. Enter David Novak, the ambitious head of Pepsi's marketing team. In 1992, he received a mandate that would change beverage history. Find Pepsi's next breakthrough innovation. Novak did not want incremental change, he wanted disruption. In the clear product trend, he saw his opportunity. Pepsi's research and development department embarked on what seemed like an impossible task. They had to remove the caramel coloring from Pepsi while maintaining its signature taste. After months of experimentation, they succeeded in creating a colorless cola that retained much of the original Pepsi profile, citrusy, sweet, with those familiar cola notes. When tested blind, consumers could taste the difference, but they could not quite put their finger on what had changed. The formula was not identical to regular Pepsi, but it was close enough to be recognizable while still feeling new. The marketing team immediately recognized the potential goldmine. They were not just selling a new flavor variant, they were selling pure cola, a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense in the context of early 1990s consumer psychology. Focus groups revealed something fascinating. When people could not see the color, they actually rated the taste more favorably. Crystal Pepsi was born. But even within Pepsi, skepticism abounded. Several executives questioned whether consumers would accept an invisible cola. After all, color had always been intrinsically linked to flavor expectations. Would people's brains reject a clear liquid that tasted like cola? These concerns were valid, but the momentum of the clear product trend was too strong to ignore. The decision was made to forge ahead, betting that novelty and health positioning would overcome any cognitive dissonance. Little did they know that this cognitive dissonance would ultimately be Crystal Pepsi's undoing. Pepsi didn't just launch Crystal Pepsi, they unleashed it. The marketing campaign was among the most ambitious in the company's history, spearheaded by a Super Bowl commercial that featured Van Halen and the anthemic song Right Now. The ad perfectly captured the early 90s zeitgeist with quick cuts, bold typography, and a message of immediate transformation. The copy proclaimed, "Right now change is in the air," treating Crystal Pepsi not just as a beverage, but as a cultural movement. The positioning was masterful. Crystal Pepsi was not presented as a novelty or a gimmick, but as the evolution of cola itself. The tagline became, "You have never seen a taste like this," deliberately playing on the visual taste. Contradiction that would later prove problematic. The messaging emphasized premium quality and purity, placing Crystal Pepsi above traditional brown colas as the health-conscious choice for a new generation. Celebrity endorsements flooded television and print media, with athletes and actors holding up clear bottles and making the same basic point. Clear meant clean, and clean meant better. The transparent bottle design itself became iconic, showcasing the product's clarity as its primary selling point. You could see right through it, and that transparency was revolutionary for a category defined by its opacity. The market response was immediate and overwhelming. When Crystal Pepsi hit test markets in early 1992, curiosity drove consumers to stores in droves. Some locations reported lines forming for what many called the clear Pepsi, a phrase that embodied both fascination and skepticism. Media coverage was extensive, with Crystal Pepsi featured on talk shows, news programs, and in countless magazine articles. Initial sales figures exceeded even Pepsi's optimistic projections. In the first months, Crystal Pepsi captured nearly 1% of the entire US soft drink market, an astonishing figure for a new product in such a saturated category. By mid-1992, as national distribution ramped up, Crystal Pepsi had become more than a beverage. It was a cultural phenomenon. The clear craze reached its peak in late 1992. Crystal Pepsi was everywhere, in coolers, on billboards, at sporting events, and in the hands of trend-setting consumers. Social media did not exist yet, but if it had, Crystal Pepsi would have been trending for months. People were posting actual letters to newspapers and calling radio stations to share their weird experience of drinking a cola that looked like water. The contradiction was the conversation. Within Pepsi's corporate headquarters, executives were convinced they had cracked the code to permanently disrupting the cola category. Market research showed awareness levels approaching 90% among target demographics, numbers typically only seen for products that had been on shelves for decades. The early success led to accelerated expansion plans that would prove disastrously premature, and awareness alone did not guarantee staying power. Pepsi rapidly scaled distribution to reach national coverage by the end of 1992. International markets in Canada, Europe, and Asia began preparations for their own Crystal Pepsi launches. Plans were drafted for Crystal Pepsi variants, diet versions, flavor extensions, even caffeine-free options. Internal projections suggested Crystal Pepsi could secure a permanent 5% market share, potentially changing the cola landscape forever. The company was riding a wave of innovation that seemed unstoppable. David Novak was hailed as a visionary. Crystal Pepsi was not just successful, it represented the future. But beneath the surface, trouble was brewing, or rather not brewing, since Crystal Pepsi's transparency was about to become its greatest liability. What Pepsi executives failed to fully appreciate was a fundamental aspect of human psychology. Our brains taste with our eyes before our tongues ever get involved. Consumer research would later confirm what began happening in households across America, a phenomenon that might best be called the brain rebellion. The problem was simple but insurmountable. When people saw a clear carbonated beverage, their brains automatically expected a lemon-lime flavor, like Sprite or 7-Up. When they tasted cola instead, a cognitive dissonance occurred that no amount of marketing could overcome. This sensory mismatch created an uncanny valley effect with beverages. It just felt wrong on a primal level. Most tellingly, repeat purchase rates began to plummet after the initial curiosity phase. People tried Crystal Pepsi once for the novelty, but their brains could not adjust to the fundamental contradiction. Sales data showed that while first-time purchases were strong, second purchases dropped by nearly 80%. The product simply could not overcome our hardwired flavor expectations. Meanwhile, Coca-Cola was not sitting idly by watching Pepsi's clear revolution. Their response was both brilliant and devious, a strategy that Coca-Cola executives would later admit was designed specifically to fail. They launched Tab Clear, intentionally positioning it as a Diet Clear Cola, using their less popular Tab brand rather than the Coca-Cola name. This was corporate sabotage at its finest. By creating an intentionally inferior clear cola and marketing it half-heartedly, Coca-Cola effectively poisoned the entire category. Tab Clear was designed to confuse consumers and retailers about what clear cola actually was: diet or regular, healthy, or just a gimmick. As one Coca-Cola executive later admitted, Tab Clear was described as kamikaze, sent on a suicide mission to take Crystal Pepsi down with it. By early 1993, the novelty factor that had propelled Crystal Pepsi's initial success had completely collapsed. Consumers, having satisfied their curiosity, returned to familiar brown colas or chose clear beverages that delivered the citrus flavor their brains expected. Retailers began reporting significant declines in shelf movement, with Crystal Pepsi bottles sitting unsold, while traditional Pepsi and Coca-Cola products continued their steady turnover. Marketing campaigns that had initially generated excitement now fell flat. No amount of advertising could convince consumers to repeatedly purchase a product that created cognitive dissonance with every sip. The disconnect between appearance and taste proved an insurmountable psychological barrier that marketing alone could not fix. By mid-1993, Crystal Pepsi had entered a death spiral. Sales were dropping 20% month over month in some regions. Grocery chains began reducing shelf space, relocating Crystal Pepsi from prime eye-level positions to lower shelves, and ultimately reducing order quantities. Consumer complaints focused less on the taste itself and more on the unsettling experience of the taste and appearance mismatch. Inside Pepsi, intense debates raged about how to save their clear innovation. Some executives pushed for formula changes to make Crystal Pepsi taste more like what its appearance suggested, perhaps adding citrus notes or reducing the cola profile. Others argued for doubling down on marketing to help consumers overcome their psychological resistance. A third faction pushed for discontinuation, arguing that the cognitive dissonance problem was fundamental and unsolvable. The final nail in Crystal Pepsi's coffin came when market research confirmed that Coca-Cola's Tab Clear strategy had succeeded brilliantly. The clear cola category as a whole had become associated with failure and confusion. Consumers no longer saw clear cola as the future, they saw it as a gimmick that had run its course. In late 1993, less than a year after its national launch, Pepsi discontinued Crystal Pepsi. The company was forced to acknowledge that their bold experiment had failed. Millions of bottles were sold at massive discounts to clear inventory, with some stores practically giving the product away. The clear revolution had come to an inglorious end. The Crystal Pepsi experience taught Pepsi and the entire beverage industry a lesson that now seems obvious, but was revolutionary at the time. You cannot fight human psychology with marketing. No matter how strong your campaign, how clear your messaging, or how large your budget, certain sensory expectations are hardwired into our brains. The industry gained a new appreciation for how fundamentally color influences taste perception. Studies conducted after Crystal Pepsi's failure confirmed that color creates powerful flavor expectations that are extremely difficult to override. Clear beverages work perfectly well for citrus, mint, or fruit flavors, but they create an insurmountable cognitive barrier for cola profiles. Crystal Pepsi quickly became a case study in business schools worldwide about the relationship between innovation and consumer psychology. It exemplified how even well-executed products can fail when they contradict deeply ingrained sensory expectations. The lesson was not that companies should not innovate, but that innovation must work with human psychology rather than against it. Interestingly, Crystal Pepsi found new life in the nostalgia cycle that began in the 2010s. As millennials who experienced Crystal Pepsi as children grew up, they developed a nostalgic attachment to this failed product from their youth. Responding to social media campaigns and petitions, Pepsi released limited-time Crystal Pepsi comebacks in 2016 and again in 2022. These nostalgic re-releases generated substantial buzz online, with unboxing videos and taste test reactions accumulating millions of views. Yet the sales data from these comebacks confirmed what Pepsi had learned 2 decades earlier: the appeal was entirely novelty-based. People purchased Crystal Pepsi for the nostalgic experience or to satisfy curiosity, but repeat purchases remained minimal. The broader impact of Crystal Pepsi's failure extended well beyond Pepsi itself. The collapse effectively ended the clear products equals healthy trend of the early 1990s. Other beverage companies, watching Pepsi's expensive mistake, learned to ensure that their innovations maintained consistency between visual cues and taste experience. Perhaps most tellingly, Crystal Pepsi became shorthand in business circles for well-intentioned failure, an innovation that made perfect sense on paper, but failed due to fundamental human factors its creators had not fully considered. It joins the pantheon of famous product failures like New Coke and the Ford Edsel, remembered not for what they achieved but for what they taught. The story of Crystal Pepsi is not just about a failed beverage. It is about how our brains process sensory information, how innovation can clash with instinct, and how no amount of marketing can overcome certain fundamental psychological barriers. In that sense, Crystal Pepsi's greatest success may have been in what it taught us about the limits of innovation in the face of human nature. The clear cola that briefly captured America's imagination ultimately became transparent in a different way, revealing the invisible but powerful connections between what we see, what we expect, and what we taste.